All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. So, hey, everyone, thank you for joining this afternoon. My name's Les Roach. I'm with 5S Technologies, and we've got a pretty special event lined up for you folks this afternoon. I know we're really excited about it. It's going to be very informative and a lot of fun, so I hear. And so those of you that have worked with 5S for a while, or at least have talked to us recently, obviously you've probably heard us talking about security. That's top of mind and very relevant with almost everyone that we speak to on a daily basis. And one of our great partners and part of our own internal security stack here at 5S is a company called Huntress. And we're very fortunate today to have Kyle Hansloven on from Huntress. He is the CEO and founder of Huntress, and also a former employee of the NSA. And Kyle's going to take us through a demo and show us what real life hackers are trying to do to your systems, and then maybe share some best practices on how you can help protect yourselves from those nasty ransomware and malware threats that are happening on a daily basis. So with that, I am going to kick it over to Kyle and let him get us started here.
Yeah, I really appreciate the warm introduction. Huge thanks everyone for joining me. I will mention just a couple things real quick. One, I love using and abusing the chat. Sometime if you see over in your GoToWebinar panel, you'll usually have an option that says, hey, I want to send a chat to maybe organizers and panelists. I'll be watching throughout it. So whether you have live questions, the one benefit of this is I'm not just here like giving you a sales pitch. I'm here walking you through on like how this stuff is actually done based on my experience. I'll dive into kind of some of the real world cases where like, hey, your security stack probably is prepared for some of these. And some places where your security stack might ask you the question of like, how would we handle if we tried to actually, have one of these scenarios kick off with one of our, maybe our own employees. So instead of just boring you, like I said, with slides, I'm gonna do a real quick intro about where I'm at, what skills I come from, where I've kind of cut my teeth, and that'll help kind of set the tone real well for some of the bigger presentation that's going to come, which is the live hacking demonstration. So let's start with some screen share, make sure all this stuff is working first before we get too far into it, and then we will go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and go from webcam real quick to the screen sharing capability. In full screen mode right now. Could we do a favor, lesson, just as a double check? I'm looking, I've got the ability to share webcam. I'm not seeing the ability to screen share real quick, but that's perfect time. Thank you for giving me that presenter stick. So now we're gonna go ahead and do the multi-screen. All right, so we've got multiple screens here, and I'm curious, as you pick and choose your presenting screen, I'm always curious of which one that it grabs. So Les, can you give me a quick thumbs up as we get ready to go, just to make sure that we're live? On my end, it's saying, hey, we're successfully sharing screen. Not 100% sure which screen though that it's sharing here. Are you able to see a lovely about me, or are you seeing maybe kind of a more boring background?
I see the blue Huntress background.
Okay, so let's go ahead, and what we'll do is we'll get creative here on the fly. And if it's not kind enough to allow me to grab the other screen, we will just go ahead and, how about now? You see my ugly mug now?
Yes.
Nice. So these shady fellows are my co-founders, right? So we cut our teeth at NSA, over 13 years of offensive cyber expertise, creating implants. That's the software to be able to pull intelligence back. Creating exploits, that's the software to be able to get into your computer networks. And my job specifically was long-term persistent access. So think about like in the counterterrorism mission, you're not there to just like gather a little bit of data on hackers. You're there to gather a whole lot of data on hackers for a long period of time, not really a smash and grab type operation. So that was my job. And if you think about this from a technical point of view, we sometimes hear the acronyms like APT. A stands for advanced, right? And you see a lot of like awesome machine learning technologies. And for instance, a lot of behavior-based heuristics are some of the other buzzwords that get thrown around. Those look at the advanced threats. The T part is the one that actually looks at like threat actors. And so there's a lot of common ways to be able to like profile. What do these threat actors do? Do they come from the same IP addresses? Do they do these same tactics, techniques, and procedures? But my skill was the P, the long-term persistent access. And my skill there actually landed me the top performer award for quite literally like top cyber warfare operator there at NSA. But maybe my coolest achievement is my co-founders and I won the World Series at DEF CON's Capture the Flag. And the reason I always start out with an awesome slide like this, it's to be able to establish credibility, right? There's just so many people online that say, I'm a security expert or I'm a thought leader, but you and I both know that. That just means they read like Bleeping Computer or Twitter and then they post the newest, latest thing du jour, but they might not actually have the skills to get it done. So for instance, my team is the type of team that hunts people down, maybe both on the dark web. We tend to, when they're trying to compromise businesses of all sorts, we try to put them in one place behind bars. So we really are laser focused. There's over 34,000 businesses that use Huntress software under the hood. And our goal is to be able to get these people in jail. That same cybersecurity expertise, for better or worse, sometimes lands us in the courtroom as well. Like for instance, the SolarWinds incident. Our team played a whole lot of, kind of what I would call background experience, meaning like when this incident became public, it was Huntress trying to figure out who else was impacted. Was it just SolarWinds Orion? Or was it other SolarWinds product as well? Because tons of our partners use that. And for better or worse, I'm referenced with the company in the class action lawsuit against SolarWinds. And this keeps going. Huntress was the company that when we were looking for things that slip by preventive products, I happened to be the one that challenged Microsoft when they said, hey, this is a very limited and targeted attack. Unfortunately, it turned out we ended up realizing that it wasn't just a couple Exchange servers that were compromised, but Huntress was the one that challenged it on March 3rd. And then March 5th, Krebs on Security came out and said, oh gosh, there's 90,000 computers worldwide, 30,000 in the US alone of Exchange servers that were terminated. So we really do live, eat, breathe this cybersecurity world. And maybe the latest claim to fame, which I'll just stop with this slide deck real quick, is we were the team that discovered the Kaseya incident. So for instance, that's the type of credibility that we bring to this presentation. The stuff that I'm going to demonstrate is a live demo, which means stuff is going to go wrong. Stuff is going to be funny. Stuff is going to be a lot easier than you expected. Some of this stuff is going to be silly. Like I actually got a chance to talk with Les beforehand and said, hey, I try to tailor every audience or every presentation to our target audience. So tell me a little bit more about this audience. He said, look, I'm a diehard Carolina Canes fan. I want to show them something they haven't seen before, but I want it to relate, whether they're in state, federal government, whether they're, have a full IT department and they're looking for co-managed or they're looking for help with fully managed. I want to be able to help show people what the actual risk is, not tell them about doom and gloom. And I said, hey, brother, let's jump on this. So what I want you to do is, we're going to do a little bit of role playing in here, but you got to think of kind of two scenarios. This right here, when we're looking at this scary blue screen, right, with the dragon, this is Kyle, with his hacker hoodie in the basement, his mom's basement in his underwear hacking you. That's the type of a role that I'm playing when you're seeing this screen. The screen over here is going to be, I just chose, with the Carolina Canes, right? I'm a fan of hockey as well. I thought, you know what, if we hacked somebody like a sports team, how might this play out? And I think that's going to help us really figure out like, okay, well, none of us are probably sports teams. If you're from Carolina Canes, just a heads up, I'm not hacking you. This is a mocked up demonstration with virtual machines and everything will be safe. But what's beautiful about this is you're going to see how simple, like instead of, when people hear like NSA, they tend to say, well, Kyle, to be honest, no one like you is going to come after little old me. And you're right. Someone like me is probably not going to spend that type of time. However, I'm using a free open source penetration tool set. There's nothing special about this tool set at all. And you're going to see a lot of this. I'm going to copy and paste commands over here just to show you the basics of what you can do with a little bit of open source tools. I'm not going to use any 0 days, no exploits or anything of that nature, no NSA magic here. It's really to show you what that less sophisticated someone with, an abnormal amount of time on their hand can do when targeting a network. For instance, the person that I'm going to target is going to be an unprivileged user. And we're going to look and play through this and figure out how this might play out long term, walking through each step of the security stack. So we're going to kick it off. I hope everybody's ready, and huge thanks. For those of you who are asking questions, I do already appreciate it. So yes, live demonstration in this hacking framework, by the way, is called Metasploit. It's part of the Kali Linux distribution. So thanks for that question already, and keep them coming. Like I said, there's no reason that we need to, get overly formal here together. So what I've done is I've already pre-staged a victim, and I'm ready. And the reality is most people, when they get in, they start with like simple emails. So I staged some emails right here, and I was thinking to myself, when I really try to get into networks, I always try to put a company or a victim in a situation where they have no option but to comply. So let's think about that real quick. Within your organization, imagine if you had like maybe an HR department or recruiters, and you were like, hey, I've had this position open for 90 days, and you catch up with the recruiter, and the recruiter says, Les, I really, really wanted to hire this person, but I thought the resume was malware, so I just didn't open it. Like, that would not fly, right? You wouldn't be happy with that at all. That person is required to do their job. They open attachments for a living. And that's why you might consider some type of alternative like resume system that doesn't involve opening shady attachments from the web. Other folks, their processes might be, that's why you see the finance scams. Of course, please remit payment to whatever. Can you imagine again, Les, if one of your team members were like, Kyle, I really wanted to pay that bill, but I thought it was like, it just doesn't work. And so I try to think here, if I was gonna go after somebody with the Carolina Canes, I really started looking, and I said, you know what? I want to know who, right, on the staff is going to have the good information. Who on the staff is going to have like maybe the nitty gritty. And so I ended up looking up, and it turns out there's a gentleman named Don Waddell, and Don's job is the general manager of this hockey team. And so I thought to myself, if I just send Don the type of scam that, for instance, isn't exploiting that psychology we just talked about before, which is, if you think about hackers, that's exactly what we're doing, is abusing trust or artificially making something urgent. Like all the hackers that when COVID first broke, they came out with all those, hey, here's how you can get more information on vaccine, or here's how you can get lots of hand sanitizer. They took advantage of urgency. So if I was Don and thinking about my team, especially as I was looking for another Stanley Cup, championship, and I got an email, especially if you caught me at the right time, and it came in somewhere more casual. Hey, Don, I just tried you on your mobile, but got voicemail. Got to give you the heads up though. One of your staff is wrapped up in an insider gambling scandal. I'd love to tell you more about it. Still under wraps. I've attached this case report, but media is going to be on this ASAP. Notice the typo too. Those are some of the early signs, and hopefully internally, this is where, if we already think about your defense in depth or layered security strategy, this is where good old fashioned user education. So whether you're using something like KnowBe4 or any of the other awesome security education platforms, this is where hopefully Don and his team, let's be real, Don as the general manager probably doesn't even open his email. It's probably his executive business partner or assistant that maybe does that on his behalf. And what's beautiful is think about that. Like the first thing he or she or whoever that executive assistant, or maybe even Don himself, right? If he opened this, he'd be like, oh crap, this better not be, right? He's probably hoping like, I hope this is the mascot. This better not be, my star player, or I lost my goalie or something. And so what happens is, because of that urgency, and inevitably something slips past your anti-spam. I'm curious for the audience that's helping write questions, what type of security stack or just even basic IT stack do you use? Is there a lot of people that are using O365 or maybe some G Suite users out there? I happen to know a lot of the O365 users themselves are the first to be able to get caught up in a situation where they're like, hey, I know there's this advanced threat protection, but it's not always configured to help maximize what shady emails should come and go. Things like DNS security and DMARC and all kinds of other things that prevent shady spoofing emails from writing in your or getting into your inbox. So inevitably someone like Don clicks this thing and he's like, all right, well, what am I up against, right? Somebody's getting arrested, what's going on? And what's funny about this is I would encourage, and I'll show you some live like ransomware as a service cybercrime forums at the very end of this to help illustrate. But what blows me away is most ransomware actors, I would argue, provide better like technical support and better like checklists than most of your IT departments, right? It just happens. They have to do this. So what happens is, you could imagine Don here getting this email. It's like, okay, I've got spam filtering, I've got some maybe anti-malware, I've trained up on my user education, but I really need to look. And he opens this case document from claiming the local police department. If somebody was really thorough, they would have looked up that police department, maybe even found a valid phone number for the police department that goes straight to voice message or voicemail. I love to do those because it gives some credibility if someone tries to trust but verify on you that, oh, yes, this did go to the police department. It must be real. No hacker would possibly give a fake voice message, or no hacker would possibly go through the time to try to make sure that I get some BS email. And so they inevitably open the document. And for those that are in IT, they're already looking, right? Anybody that's in security, you're like, no, I see the docm file extension. You know this is a macro-enabled Word document. But the Carolina Canes, right? Hurricanes don't, and their staff, they don't know what that means. They don't, to be honest, they don't care. They care about winning hockey games and selling, concessions and seats. That's how the organization makes money. Same thing like accountants, right? We care about filing taxes. So when we see this document and we see this document is protected, we think, this must be real, because they wouldn't want to send a case document unencrypted. I've been taught that if you send data unencrypted, hackers can look at this. So they go through and it says, yeah, let's open this document in Microsoft Office because previewing offline is unavailable. Well, that's what I'm trying to do right now. I'm trying to preview. And so it says, okay, I got to open it in Office. So of course, this is again where you start having those feelings where you're like, no, don't open that attachment. I really don't want you to do this. And this is where step 2 kicks in. If this document was downloaded from your email, which of course it was, please enable editing from the yellow bar above. So they're thoughtful, they give great instructions. There's enable editing button. And of course they click it. And we know the very last one of this is going to go to step 3. And I'll zoom in just to really, this isn't like, by the way, Kyle's made up email. Like I really did just adapt and I changed the hacker's payload from their payload to my payload for this demonstration. And so here it is again. Once you have enabled this editing, please click enable content. So this is that moment right here where you hope that you've got some type of solid prevention-based software, right? Something that's using maybe some of that, nowadays the marketing words are like endpoint detection and response or next generation AV. But what I mean by that is some shady stuff just went down on this computer, but Don here has no idea that this is the beginning of the compromise that's really going to take off. So let's look at that error message. Incorrect Word version, cannot unprotect this document. I'm curious in the chat, who thinks, or what do you think that this person is going to do? Do you think this, you think they're going to maybe open it again? Of course. My favorite thing though, and someone just called it out in email or in chat. Yeah, of course. First thing they're going to do is, oh, this didn't work for me. Let me send it to one of my coworkers. So you're exactly right. It starts spreading this attachment. Some people call IT. What's funny about calling IT is sometimes those users log in with their elevated privileges, but little did they know that this fake error message is just fake. It's pre-coded in the malware to make you think that there was something wrong with it. But behind the scenes, what's called a session. Really, I have remote access to this computer. So you'll see here, I'm going to say sessions-I, which means I want to interact with this session. And I always try to do some very simple proof that I have access to this computer. So let's go back to our victim over here, incorrect Word version. Let's maybe do a screenshot. And again, what's cool about this is I've already got some of these pre-set up for copy and paste. But the reality is there's a help menu, which I'll show you here in a second. So when I say screenshot, show it to me, it's going to say, okay, I'll gladly take a screenshot. I'll save it for you. And voila, you can see that this is me. Even though this user is unprivileged, unprivileged users can take screenshots. So all I did was abuse the built-in functionality and even your least privilege to do that. And I'm going to continue abusing this throughout the whole presentation, maybe just to give you some reassurance again that we're not BSing. We'll agree, this goes away, it goes back to our document, and then you should be able to see that even in this example here where our shady hacker could clearly take another screenshot, we should get a second screenshot here that looks like this desktop. So it's, it's live, it's interactive, and this is that, oh crap moment, right? Oh no, I know what's going on. The reason I said, by the way, that this is where you hope to have some of that prevention-based technology that's not just your good old-fashioned traditional, no offense, there's some pretty mundane antivirus out there that hasn't got up to modern speed, stuff that you'll sometimes hear signature-based or just doing the very basics. But what I love about malware when I'm writing payloads, I try to even put these next generation products in a hard situation. For instance, what happened is when I opened this payload, a Word document spawned. And then from that Word document, when I enabled macros, I abused a lot of the built-in functionality in Windows, like PowerShell or an HTML application renderer, these built-in things that come on every version of Windows. And instead of using actual malware, I used and abused trusted applications, because sometimes these trusted applications, they give extra reputation. Just like, let's be real, let's look at how trust works in this environment. I'm Kyle, we don't know each other, and this is our first time meeting, but we have connections here with Les and the team at 5S. And so as a result, I trust Les, Les trusts you, and through the result, we extend that trust to each other. That's why we're hanging out. That's kind of the way that some of these machine learning models can get beat up, is they're built to look for abnormal. And so every now and then hackers get lucky enough, and to be honest, those models do a good job at preventing. But let's be real, I would not have had my job in long-term persistent access if hacking was just always that easy. So let's go back and let's take a peek. And if you could just keep me out by running antivirus, I'm sure that sounds great, but that's not always realistic. So let's see more what we can do. Like, let's think about it. If we had access to Don Waddell's computer, and you can easily translate this to your own organization, what would we do to him? I told you there was features here in help. I don't even have to remember what goes on here. You can just take a look, and some of them are fancy. Like, if we get up here, I want to change or read the contents of a file, or I want to change the directory. Yeah, you're right. I can list all your files. So if we go down and I type in dir, I am looking at the directory of C users user documents. So when we talk about some of these things, like, let's be real, very rare do hackers land on a computer and, for instance, just start stealing your data. It's almost never that easy. But for the sake of this, 1 hour of hanging out with each other, imagine yourself, maybe the first thing I did as a hacker is I created a persistent foothold. That's the way that allows me to have long-term access. And maybe I did. Maybe I had to slow down Don's computer enough to get IT to log in so I could kidnap one of your elevated either credentials or keystroke log you or something of that nature. But sooner than later, hackers are going to, they don't hack you just for the sake of hacking. The juice has got to be worth the squeeze, and data has value. So for instance, a lot of us think about ransomware as the scary part, but nowadays it's multiple ways. Sometimes they call it dual or triple extortion, meaning they first steal your data, they then encrypt your data, and then they hold your reputation for ransom. Those are the very common techniques of cyber criminals these days. But let's be real, I'm here going after the canes, and maybe I want to end that way, but this party's just getting started. So you could imagine if I'm digging through here and looking at stuff like doping test results, like, that is right up my alley. So, I mean, if you start thinking about what I'm going to, even, this user has privileges to that file. So for instance, if I wanted to go in there and say doping test results dot Excel spreadsheet and download it, I mean, voila, I've got that spreadsheet. Or whatever else is crazy, trade roster. I know, I mean, all of us, whether you like hockey or not, in football, we all have the concept of a draft. Could you imagine from a competitive intelligence standpoint if something like a team leaked or lost their trade roster of who they were going to trade and what they were going to do with their draft picks? That's pretty sensitive information. And it's probably not too crazy for you to think about, oh crap, this person just opened this email, and because they have my permissions, they can access any file locally or on a file share that I have access to. That's why privilege privilege management, right? PAM, privilege access management, is so important. So I'm jumping into chat again, and I see folks asked, how were you able to steal that file? Well, it turns out when I open that email attachment, malware is running on this computer. And you might be asking yourself, but don't I have a firewall for that? Or what about my layers like DNS security? Well, you are right. This is why we have those layers. And if you don't have these kind of stacked the way you should be thinking about already, like your 5S team saying, hey, I need to think this through. I might be susceptible. But what happened is my malware called out, but instead of calling out to like shady.ru, right, the quintessential Russian website that sounds bad, what if I made my payload call back to like an Azure IP or a trusted, like maybe a Dropbox, like when I'm exfiltrating my files? why steal your files and send them to like some website or IP address with low reputation when I could have done some analysis here in this network and done some digging around in the directories and said, you know what? I bet you have stuff in your programs and see, let's take a look. I do some directory. Oop, this is where I told you it was live demonstration. I'm clearly failing away here. So let's go back and take a peek. As I'm looking through the files, I could have figured out where your drive, like, or if you're using OneDrive or Dropbox, or maybe you're using Google Drive, or maybe some Apple, like, why don't I steal your files that way? Because let's be real, is your firewall gonna stop me from uploading files to a cloud-based file service that you use? And that is a very common way to be able to use and abuse some of these situations. So I'll let you know that that malware was running. It has a connection going back and forth, and I am able to task that malware to say, gather this file and send it to the destination I want. In this case, it was my local computer here, but there is no reason this couldn't have been, once again, one of those trusted third parties. And that's where, like, it's important to have a DNS filter, because you shouldn't make it easy. The low bar shouldn't be here where hackers can just send it to the malicious website that has a known bad reputation. But it also, at the same time, you have to consider there's no such thing as perfect prevention. So when the bar is way up here, at least you made those hackers have to earn their access. So anyway, I collected some files, and I always try to think about, like, what other shenanigans might I go for? Like doping test results. I know some of this group here, especially being in North Carolina and sports, like this group parties hard. And yeah, maybe I go after the trade roster, but I'm looking at all those other files here, and I'm much more interested in, like, what is passed out.jpg? Like, you know, and this is probably somebody maybe after a hockey game got a little bit too tanked, and you're probably thinking, what type of sensitive data do I have in my own documents folder or my downloads folder? What type of things could be stolen here? And we haven't even got to the real juicy stuff. You're probably thinking, oh crap, I've got HIPAA data. Or maybe you don't have HIPAA, but you've got, you know, my favorite is, I was with a business the other day that was in construction. They're about 400 employees, and they did about 100 million in total sales, not quite to say revenue, but total sales they did per year. And they said, Kyle, to be honest, I'm a warehouse. What do I have to lose? And I asked the question, I said, what happens when I gathered as a hacker 3 things? The first thing I gathered was maybe your employee, salaries. And they said, stop right there. I didn't even think if somebody went out there and posted my employee salaries, that would cause me more than enough of a storm within the company. And I started pulling a little bit more and said, well, what if I even took it a step further? And hackers now, very common, will go after stuff like your cyber insurance policy. Curious for the audience, anybody thinking through, like, why would they go after your cyber insurance policy? Why would they care? Well, it turns out when this situation and we get this party started, well, one time I might want to actually extort you and know how much to charge. And what better way to do that than say, oh, I know your cyber insurance policy has a $4 million, ceiling on it. And on that umbrella, well, I better start asking you for $8 million first. That way, when you bring your breach coach in who works with me and says, Kyle, or shady hacker Kyle, I really, really want our data back. We're going to pay for a decryptor, but 8 million's crazy. We can pay you 2 or 3. And I say, oh, agree, we'll get it to 4. You walk away feeling good. Well, at least we didn't pay 8. I walk away saying, I knew you were going to pay me 4 from the beginning because I knew what your insurance policy, and I'll show screenshots of this in action. A lot of this targeting state, government, SLED type, you think about like education, where they know what the county has already approved. Hey, I know that that they don't have to go to the county council or the state government or state CIO to get authorization to pay under $1 million. So I'm going to ask for 990,000. That's the type of stuff that actually happens. And they look at this as a business. So let's keep going. We played fun. We had fun with the pictures, but I'm curious, like, what other shenanigans, right? I mentioned, like, I might keystroke log you. I'm curious, has any of the audience members even thought about, like, what does keystroke logging look like from the hacker's point of view? Like, I don't know. I mean, I just went after this computer, right? But there's all kinds of things that, like, could happen. Like, I don't know personally if the Carolinas Canes team uses QuickBooks. Maybe they use Sage. I don't even know if it's even appropriate for the general manager to log in. I'm assuming that's somebody in finance. But the reality is, all of us know we use sensitive websites. What's neat about this is when hackers are typing websites and things like this, or sorry, when users are typing that, hackers with just a couple commands again, and notice I'm gonna hit tab. I just typed in the word key, hit tab a couple times, and it gave me all kinds of options like key scan, start. Well, the reality is I just started a keystroke logger. It will only get, Don's actual credentials because I don't have privileges as an underprivileged user. Say, for instance, if this is like a VDI environment, like a remote desktop, or maybe you're using something like Citrix, I wouldn't have the permissions to monitor everybody else on that computer, but I would be able to monitor this user. And as I get credentials and elevate privileges, I then can do more credential gathering. So I'm curious, and maybe someone can play along here. And I'm just looking at chat. So I'll put in maybe some silly admin username. But Les, can you throw me, or anybody actually, somebody want to throw me some password that's not just like password $1 Because let's be real, we all know that that's the shenanigans that are probably out there. But I kind of want to show that this is, indeed real. Or Matt, I know you're writing to the entire audience. Someone throw me a password and we'll put it in here. Okay, I like that one. So, oh gosh, canes are terrible. Here we go. Let's get this in here. Canes are terrible! Exclamation mark. Shook says so. I can see that we got some people getting real salty here. So I type it in. And what's really funny about that, have you ever thought about on the other end as the hacker? What do you see, right? How does this actually look? And for instance, I'm going to show you the raw text output instead of the pretty GUI. But notice you see, even when I was admin, I hit tab to go from one field to another. Did you even think about that? That's the type of stuff that hackers will see. And then while I was waiting to try to get a password, canes are terrible. I had my finger holding on the shift, right? We take a look at it. And then you see me actually typing. Canes are terrible. There's the exclamation mark. Shook says so. That's awesome. That's that type of thing that we can see in here. And so anyway, that's that nonsense that I'm telling you of. We went from email that aired out. By this time, Don's probably going back to whatever, he does, right? He's focusing on business, probably trades, probably making sure that people's contracts and the budget are in order. But this is a great example here of, for instance, how a situation starts small and can escalate big if you don't interrupt this incident before it goes large. So let's keep playing here. So I know some folks already wrote me, and I wasn't ignoring your chat, but I already wrote and said, hey, look, I saw some stuff on that help menu. And you're right. When I was scrolling real quickly in this help menu, somebody noticed record microphone was in here. They asked, did that say record mic? Yes. If you're a laptop, or think about every phone these days, every phone, tablet, laptop has a mic and a webcam. And hopefully, this reiterates why you should use that little slide to cover it. But what's neat about this is I'm on a webcam right now with you. I'm running as an unprivileged user on my current account following least privilege, but I'm able to do a webcam. As a result, I can turn on that webcam. What's even cooler is some webcam software, that little LED that you feel, oh, if that ever comes on, I know someone turned my webcam on. Sometimes some of those LEDs are actually software controlled, meaning I could set just a couple settings in the registry and voila, your bright LED no longer comes on when I get in. So let's play, right? Yeah, we could record the mic, but I'm curious, do we have we do. We have a webcam running on this computer. So just like this, I can get real awkward real quick and say, you know what, let's stream the webcam. And what's neat about this is I imagine old Don is probably, going off doing whatever he's doing. And if anybody's ever seen this guy before, the general manager of the Canes, like he's the quintessential, stodgy, kind of crusty old angry white guy. I mean, this is him right now, not impressed. And you're probably like, all right, Kyle, well, that's not his. But what I did is in this virtual environment, I actually mocked up and added an extra webcam. So this isn't BS. This is quite literally me hacking through another webcam on here while also talking to you on this one. So I hope this just reiterates that's the type of stuff that some of these basic tools, and again, you don't need to be an NSA security expert or wizard to get these done. You can use free tools and a bunch of copy and pasting, watching YouTube videos to get some of these, I guess, sexy Hollywood style hacks to happen, but they really are pretty much straightforward features again that we're just abusing built-in features to the operating system to do shady things. So I hope that was a nice like eye opener there of like, okay, Kyle, you creeped me out a little bit. You made this a little bit too personal. And yeah, those are the things you can do. And I enjoy that type of example, right? We stole files. You had a chance to catch me, hopefully, with your preventive layers. There's all kinds of things that we could be doing. But really, I really want to kind of pull the thread a little bit and say, well, what is our job here? What is really as hackers? We're not here to do parlor tricks and turn on webcams. We're here to get something done. So of course, I'm going to move through your network. I'm going to find your files that are sensitive. I'm going to escalate privileges, maybe try to, some hackers just do and only resell access. I don't think a lot of you probably realize that there is just like a business where you're like, I don't build cars as an auto body shop, I repair them. And other people are like, I don't build whole cars, I work on engines, and they specialize. Cyber criminals specialize as well. And it's very common for these cyber criminals to actually, oh, I work on getting access, but they're not the people who do the ransomware. They're not the people who take this to the next stage. So anyway, I'll kind of circle back to how this, impacts you. Again, audience question just came up. Does this session persist across reboots? I am definitely going to get to it, and I have not made this session as of right now persistent. Notice in my tricks of all kinds of things that I might do, I actually have the ability to pre-create, and just in case anybody is not tracking what persistence is, persistence just means that when I get kicked off this computer, can I get back onto it? Like, think about it. If Don goes right now and he logs out of QuickBooks and closes his email and maybe he gets a patch and we're back to the desktop, that would have kicked me out of that computer. And could you imagine how inefficient that would be as a hacker if every day I had to phish you and get you to open another email again? So I kind of hand waved it earlier, but I easily could have gone through here and said, I'm going to create a value in the registry that automatically starts running. It makes a foothold and does some of these shady shenanigans here, calls out to Bitly and downloads a payload or something of that nature. And this is something that just ran. I just successfully set and created the foothold. I didn't do it earlier because I kind of want to show you. So, audience question again, I really appreciate you escalating that up to me because that's a good example of, well, where do you fit? What is this persistent thing and why should I care? Well, the reason that I want you to care about these is there's a lot of opportunities to prevent this from escalating. It's a lot like preventive medicine, if you think about it, right? That doctor never once has stopped you from getting sick, right? You've never gone to the doctor and they're like, well, good thing, they'll tell you to exercise, diet, but really preventive medicine means frequent check-ins. It means making sure that when they find something and doing your regular check-ins and look for abnormalities, let's find it before it escalates, before it gets serious, right? Let's find the cancer when it's stage 0 or stage 1, way before it's like stage 4 or terminal, because that's bad. And what I'm getting at is this whole hacking demonstration here. It was to show you all the fun, the shenanigans, and let's be real, when I'm done with this network, after I've gathered all the data, let's see what other bag of tricks I got. This is a solid one. So folks tend to ask me like, well, if you can go and download files, can you also upload files? Oh yeah, you better believe it. Notice here on the desktop, ransomware.hta is now. And what's beautiful is not only can I upload files to your environment, I can execute them with a single command, right? And so we run, execute, give it a second, and it starts the encryptor, walking all the files, all the file systems, anything along that this user has access to. Ideally, I would have actually elevated to admin privileges first to make sure not only did I encrypt Don's, but someone with admin privileges might have access to all the shares, all the juicy information. And so some of you are probably asking like, well, what could I do about that? I would encourage solid segmentation of your network. Should Don truly have access so an encryptor does this? Or maybe, for instance, when you store all your stuff in like SharePoint or some other type of Dropbox, when I encrypt, for instance, all of Don's local files, does a tool automatically take and see those encryptions and upload those to the cloud? If so, you should probably think about, is that a safe architecture technique? Do we want that automatic syncing? And to be honest, sometimes you do, because productivity is important. That's how you make whatever difference that your company or organization does. It's because you're productive. So don't let me scare you away into thinking we shouldn't do these things. But I'm telling you, if like true shady version of me or some of the top cyber criminals, they're landing in your computer. And before you ever get to this encrypted phase, they're walking through your network, they're making a foothold. They're stealing your files, they're escalating privileges, they're deleting your backups. Like that Kaseya incident, built into the ransomware that ran in that massive Kaseya incident that was all over the news in the last kind of like 3 weeks. That was built in. Any folder on the file system while this ransomware is running, it would find anything named backup or certain file extensions, databases, and it would make sure it would delete the backups and the databases. It would make sure it would kill the processes using that. That way it can encrypt your most sensitive data. So anyway, that's wild, but I do like that question about persistence. And since I've got a little bit of time, kind of want to go a step further. Like, for instance, people tend to ask me, well, what would you do if you persisted? Like, the whole goal, if you said it's about early detection, well, it turns out a great telltale sign, for instance, of detection is footholds. How does a hacker get in? Because what happens is, unlike a lot of other things, like this malware, I can obfuscate it. The way that my command and control works, I can make it go to some legitimate trusted website. But the problem with persistence is hackers have to use real built-in operating system features and can't do something too shady because they have to comply with how the operating system is going to tell it, yes, malware, when I reboot or when another user logs in, I'm going to run you. So remember that payload I created called Foothold? Let's zoom in on this. I'm going to use the magnifying glass real quick. So take a look at my foothold here. I created it, and anytime a user logs in, it's going to automatically run mshta.exe. I'm curious for the geeks that are on this session. I've seen some of your chat, by the way, so huge thanks. MSHTA, that's that Microsoft HTML application renderer. It's built into your computer. It's already, pretty solid on here. So this foothold, for instance, is bad. It's getting ready to use a legitimate program for nefarious purposes, like this case, MSHTA, then calls command.exe, that then calls PowerShell. That's a little atypical. Why is it calling all these legitimate programs? Remember that comment I made earlier about let's use and abuse all this built-in functionality to kind of evade some of those behavior-based detections? That's what it's doing. It's adding that trust to eventually call. And so, for instance, a foothold is truly the hackers maintaining access, but not all persistence is bad. Like, for instance, you want anytime a user logs in for the OneDrive application to automatically spawn so you can get access to your shared drive. Or maybe if you use Teams internally, you want your Teams chat or Slack chat to automatically start. So there's real reasons for applications to be persistent. However, a foothold is a malicious version of that persistence. So I hope that helps explain a little bit of that type of foothold, and maybe to show you in action. Like, I always think about it, if this is a race, how do we kick the hacker out as soon as possible? With our last little bit of time, I want to show you maybe my favorite technique. It involves no malware, but it actually is me abusing more operating system features to do something that I shouldn't. So I like it. I really like that, some of those questions. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here to a whole other part of the operating system. And this is so old that if you take a look as I'm digging through some of these folders, I'm not actually going to go into software, Microsoft Windows, which is a folder, by the way. That's where the new hotness is under the Windows folder. The old school stuff that still Microsoft is always about backwards compatibility forever and ever and ever is under this Windows NT directory. And when we go in here, one of these old features back from kind of the Windows NT4 days is this thing called image file execution options. And I want to show you how this works real quick. So if anybody's ever seen like in a command prompt to help you understand what these hackers are doing, if I took a tool like Microsoft Paint, mspaint.exe, and I ran it, you get the built-in paint tool. It's no Photoshop, it's not very sexy, but it's built in. Well, watch what I do. I use this legitimate functionality and I say, Microsoft, anytime a program comes up named mspaint.exe, instead of running that program, attach what's called a debugger. That's a way to troubleshoot something. But instead of actually using a legit debugger, why don't I say, run the calculator. So again, I'm going to do that same command again, mspaint.exe. Okay, I got a calculator. It's weird. And you're probably asking, well, what the heck would hackers do that for? Why would they even care about this type of shenanigans, right? And the reality is, well, what if instead of making MS Paint, remember how I used that magnifying tool? What if I took the magnifying tool and said, you know what? Anytime the magnifier runs, let's create a debugger. And on that debugger, attach command.exe instead of using like that silly example, the calculator. Now, some of you are probably saying in here, why would I even care? I've never used the magnifying, Kyle. The first time I've ever seen magnify used is when you just used it. Well, the reason for it is I saw already in chat, folks mention of like using remote desktop or Windows 365 or Windows virtual desktop setup. When you log in to a computer, for instance, like this Windows 10 computer, I'm going to go ahead and sign out and pretend that when we compromised Don, you cleaned me out, you got my malware out of there, you found my foothold, you kicked me out, but you didn't know that I left that debugger, right? You didn't know that I had persistent access. So when I log into your network, I usually get a login like on a remote desktop screen that looks a lot like this. I have to put in my domain, I have to put in my passwords, and I actually get prompted here. And by the way, for those of you who have two-factor, you're probably like, well, Kyle, even if you got my password, two-factor would have stopped you. And you are right. If you're not using two-factor, by the way, Azure AD, Duo, whatever that is, you should heavily consider it. All the headache that it is, this is totally how you prevent your environment from being embarrassed long-term. There's just really not much of a better investment to make. But hackers get this screen, and even though I can't, I don't have a password, or maybe I can't get in with two-factor, well, what can I do? Down here in the bottom corner, when you click this is the ease of access panel. And the ease of access panel is that thing that reads things to you and makes it better.
Your computer easier to use.
Notice here the narrator reading things to me. Well, as a hacker, when I click magnifier, well, instead of magnifying glass coming up, command.exe comes out, which is kind of like a backdoor. But something's even scarier about this. Since I backdoored magnifying glass and it's in this concept, take a look at this. If I run who am I? I'm actually running with full root system elevated privileges. So if I want to maybe take this to the next level and get myself back in that network, yeah, maybe I can't log in as a domain user, but I easily could say net user, our hacker Les here, I'm going to create an account for Les, give him a good strong password like root beer here, and I can add him an account. And what's cooler is I can even go in here and say net local group administrators. I see there's only a couple things in the administrators, administrator, user. But what if I come in here and say, now take my Les account and add him to that administrators group? When I run that again, I can actually make Les a local administrator and then instead of logging in as user, I can log in as Les. So I hope that's a great, kind of visual explanation of how this stuff like backdoors matter and how this might look. That said, Matt, I'm curious. You've been asking questions. I do appreciate you help facilitate some of the conversation along. That was super useful. And I hope everybody here just enjoyed kind of this like crash course of, yeah, there's a lot of places that you have to get security right? The age-old adage of it's not if, but when is true. Just like the Carolina hurricanes, though, if hurricanes happen, when the hurricanes happen and crush, kind of like Outer Banks or whatever, Outer Banks businesses are measured based on how fast they can get back into business, how fast they can go back to making money and selling, not whether or not they can dodge the hurricane. That's the posture I would encourage all of you in your IT department internally to take. It should not be, how can I stop a security incident from happening? Of course, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, but I want to make sure you all, whether you're an IT leader, maybe you're someone in executive management, somebody just presents to the board, or maybe you're a technician, I would encourage you that your posture should be, when in 2021 cyber incidents happen, that is the hurricane, they will hit. How do you commoditize this incident? How do you make it as hard as possible? Yes, you board up the windows, you shelter in place, you got your backup water, you got your generator. But when it does flatten your business, how do you make sure before this gets and escalates, right? Before that your reputation is damaged, they've got into your bank account, they're extorting you, they're encrypting, they're turning on your creepy webcam like I did. How do you give your business the best shot to survive and quickly get back up and run? And my whole thing for you is that is possible a couple ways. Some of the solid ways to be able to do that, for instance, is defense in depth. If you're not using a strong cloud-based backup solution, for instance, that's immutable. So me, when I delete your local backups, there's a cloud-based one there. You should talk to 5S. If you're not using something like a DNS filter, looking for my malicious traffic, again, this team, I can be anywhere. Huntress, like I said, I got 34,000 plus businesses. I could be on any webinar whatsoever, or I could have just had my sales team do it. But what I do is I stand by partners who actually understand and get with security. So for instance, on the 5S team, a great example of standing by this is Les and his team at 5S understand what you need. They understand the specific unique needs for co-management, meaning they're not trying to outsource all your stuff. They're not trying to take away your IT department. They want to focus on retention. If you have a great, solid security person, you know that retention of these great assets are hard. And you want to use that solid security person to be working on the hardest, sexiest, most important things to your business, not the most mundane. And for instance, in the case of like footholds, persistence, where Huntress's expertise, all those things that allowed me to show up in mainstream media by finding those footholds before they escalated, we're here to help as well. And when you get that type of incident, when it goes down, for instance, it's going to look a whole lot like this. You're going to get a ticket into whatever ticketing system you use, complementing whatever antivirus you use. If you use something sexy like a SentinelOne or CrowdStrike, we run great side by side. If you run something more traditional or mundane like a Webroot, a Bitdefender, ESETs, we can complement that as well. It's not a this or that. It's a how do we give you strength in numbers? And what's beautiful with our fancy automation plus our actual humans in the loop, make sure that you're not going to get more work. When we find an incident with the 5S team, we're going to escalate and say, hey, you know that IFEO debugger? There's a built-in backdoor that somebody just added. They actually, and this isn't made up, by the way, this right here, sethc.exe, this is just like magnifying glass tool that got backdoored. The only difference is this is that thing that when you hit shift 5 times on your Windows computer, like go ahead, if you're on a Windows computer, hit shift 5 times. And I know listening to the hacker on the webinar is a terrible thing to do. You hear that noise, sticky key starts running. So this is another common backdoor that hackers will get in, make a foothold, and even though that you rebooted, they'll log into your, for instance, to your desktop, not have credentials, hit sticky keys 5 times, boom, malware runs, or boom, the command prompt runs, and they can start doing that operation that allows them to get that data, that allows them to impact your business, that allows the situation to escalate. So I really hope that was, yeah, go ahead, Matt.
I just saw a question that came through and I wanted to make sure that we actually answered it before we jumped off. Yep. If there were GPOs restricting access to registry, command prompt, PowerShell, would you still have been able to launch those programs on behalf of the user?
Oh, that's a good, solid question that somebody asked there. So no, if you, for instance, blocked PowerShell, completely restricted it, you would not have been able to run that. But what stinks is there's probably about 200 of these legitimate applications that the IT and security industry is playing the cat and mouse game with hackers. Meaning if it's not PowerShell, they move to MSHTA, or they move from that. Like the other day, they actually was a built-in feature that you could have used Teams and make the Teams downloader run your commands for you and do malicious things. I would also encourage that PowerShell, you really can't truly fully disable PowerShell in your environment. The reason for it is Microsoft has moved so far and all into PowerShell, powering a lot of what you're doing, is you often break like third-party applications. You often cause like productivity hindrance when you truly go that extreme. So yes, there are good ways that you could have hindered it. And that's kind of this like constant cat and mouse game. So any other questions, Matt, that you saw in that I know there was a whole bunch. I had a lot direct message to me, so I was just trying to keep up with the kind of wave. And you hear my dog is even excited. He's got questions.
The only other one that I haven't gotten to yet was a question about the macro and what was inside the macro, which I'm not sure if we have enough time to kind of peel that apart, but that was a quick question at the beginning.
Yeah, inside the macro itself, it was pretty straightforward. It just used the Visual Basic scripting engine. I dropped the file, so it was kind of a big blob of data, obfuscated data, a combination of not truly encrypted, but truly just obfuscated. I encoded it, I decompressed it, I stored it, and then I did a technique called injection, reflective injection, which just loads the DLL into memory. So the file never actually has to hit disk, which means your antivirus, if it's just looking for file write, it never quite see the DLL or the payload getting there. So that was really, really good question in there. And that's how I loaded it. So there's a lot of techniques. And I know that was kind of a really technical question in there, but that was a good one. I promised a couple things, and I know that we have different target audiences on here, but I want to share some of those. Like when I made those examples earlier and told you about like threatening, school districts or going after your cyber insurance, I really meant it. Like that wasn't me like winging this thing and saying, oh, hey, oogie boogie boogie. I'm going to find a screenshot here in just a second showing like this was just a case in the last 30 days that we saw one of the businesses actually get extorted where the hackers, sent, hey, I've got your cyber insurance. I know what you're going to pay. And they actually challenged up front that when people said, hey, we can't actually pay that. So I'll make sure I bring that up. Any other good ones, Matt?
Just scrolling through, it looks like we've answered pretty much everything out there, and we have 2 minutes left. So
Awesome.
I don't know. One thing that I think is usually pretty cool is you showing that chat log between the ransomware actors and the unfortunate victims. If you have that readily available, if not, we can always.
Yeah, Matt. Do you know which chat log? And by the way, while we're pulling this up, the call to action here wasn't come by Huntress. The call to action is look. Cybersecurity is really hard, and your business alone is hard enough. The team here at 5S, right, Huntress, we're here to help. Have just a real conversation. No hard sales pitch, no slimy sales folks, just folks that really want to invest in the problem that you're experimenting and try or experiencing and be able to provide and recommend a solution that's the actual right fit. So I would just encourage, again, if you enjoyed this, the team here is just as useful. Les and Co want to have that conversation with you. They want to have the follow-ups, and that's the type of thing that the same way we had this now. For instance, if you're like, man, you blew my mind, or can you send me some of those? All the supporting resources that I used today, more than happy to send a copy. And if I recall, maybe Les, you can answer for me, or Ryan, this session was recorded, right?
Yep.
So everybody's going to get a copy of the same, from me laughing at my dog to fat fingering commands to all kinds of the silly nonsense in there. You'll get a copy of this. So that was absolutely awesome. But appreciate it, everybody. I really enjoyed the time with you. And just, again, thank you for coming to learn. If you need anything, feel free to reach out to the 5S team.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. That was awesome and very entertaining. And I think everyone would agree, a good use of time. Like Kyle said, we did record this presentation, so give us a few minutes to process it and then download it, and then shortly we'll get it uploaded to the 5S YouTube page. And as a follow-up, I'll be sending out an email to all the attendees. I'll include the link to the recording in case you want to share it with some teammates or watch it again. And if you have any questions on the security stack that we use here at 5S, some of our security partners that we recommend, or you'd just like to have a conversation about building out your own cybersecurity strategy and protection stack, then certainly reach out to us. You should know where to find us. Just call us at 5S. But me and the whole team here are standing by and look forward to talking to you. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and sign off. And thanks again for attending, and hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Cheers. Thanks for having me, everyone.